This just puts people in boxes for what? Again, so that you can have a semblance of structure at the cost of their mental health. There was a study done for,
Yeah,
yeah, there, well, I'm
yeah,
glad
that's
you
the
admit
point,
it.
right?
I'm glad you admit it. I
I
mean, that's
need
good.
people to, yeah, I need people to take. I was gonna see if I could make my point from before a bit more contentious. Maybe,
Are you
all
asking
right,
me
what do you,
about, wait, question. Are you asking me about this
yeah, go ahead.
forcing stuff on people because of the gender stuff?
That's not why, but I was thinking maybe that would be a good way to make it more contentious.
Are you in favor of it?
Well, let's say like in regard to gender norms, I would say I'm uh, in favor of imposing gender norms on people.
Imposing gender norms?
Yeah.
So what would that look like?
Well, I don't know, like expecting men to be able to change tires or um, expecting women to maybe do some kinds of
Housework, laundry.
home-based things. Yeah.
So the main problem with that though is when you have people that don't live up to those expectations, that doesn't make them any less of a man or any less of a woman. So it kind of seems silly to impose gender norms. I mean, if we want to look at it on a statistical sense, I know there was a survey of kids that was taken that found that the kids that grew up in the most rigid gender environment usually had a like lower rates of happiness, had higher rates of depression. Um, Usually, just letting people live their lives freely tends to be better. As far as imposing gender norms, the only way I could see that occurring is if you impose that on your children, which would inexplicably which would end up looking something like no son of mine is doing this or you're a boy, you have to do this. That ultimately is just dangerous and all it does is hurt people.
Yeah, I don't believe that it's dangerous. Like, say, in regard to, I know one of the hot topics of the day is like emotional, I would call it like emotional resilience. Like, say, well, and let me just state, I wouldn't limit this to just children, but let's say like the kinds of social rewards you hand out to the people around you. But like say in regard to men having the ability to kind of shove things down or suppress things or toughen up, right? I think that's good to impose on at least half of society.
Yeah, no,
Because I think,
you're advocating for things that actually hurt people straight up. So like you can literally
okay,
look at the suicide rates of men in America. White men commit suicide at higher rates than anyone else. And that's partially because there are these rigid gender expectations where if you don't live up to them, all of a sudden you're considered less of a man. That chips away at your
right.
self-confidence.
Yeah,
Like
I'm okay with that. I think the benefits are greater than the
what are the
cost, I think.
benefits?
So I think the benefit would be that, like, in order to get to the levels of prosperity that we have currently, I think that requires a ton of infrastructure. I think that infrastructure has been primarily built by men, and then, like, I mean,
Okay,
literally
hold on.
built,
Wait,
not
that
like,
infrastructure
mhm.
can exist, but that infrastructure is not made up of your day-to-day men. Just if it
Well, I
was
mean,
built by men,
that wasn't really the whole point, but
but just if it was
so,
built by men originally doesn't mean
uh-huh.
anything. It's not up to me and you as men to not be sad and to shove our emotions down, even though that's unhealthy and bad for your mental health, just because society needs us to be strong in an infrastructure like that. This is ridiculous. You're advocating for essentially more harm done on the world so that you can have some semblance of structure.
No, I don't think that it does result in more harm. I think it results in a reduction of harm. I understand what you're saying as far as the cost in regard to suicide and whatnot, right? But I think the idea is that you have certain tasks that need to be carried out in the world, and you have to impose those on people,
Like
and you have
what?
to
Like what
figure out
tasks?
some kind, well, tasks like pushing people to do hard physical labor. I need to like impose that on people because I need that hard physical labor done. And like if I, so there's a couple of options, right? I could determine that I want to be impartial and just let people do whatever they want, right? And then it would be, I think that most people do not want to participate in hard physical labor.
Well, some people
And I think
do. If
that's
they're
not a
looking for
good
money,
option.
if they're younger. I mean, if we're talking
Right.
about purely like muscle mass, then yeah, men are most likely going to be better at physical labor just because generally speaking, men tend to, or males, I guess I'll say, tend to be stronger than females. Sure. But a lot of these things that are gendered expectations are based on nothing like that. For example, there's this idea that the women are the emotional ones and the men are the more rational ones. This is actually just not true. Again, this just puts people in boxes for what? Again, so that you can have a semblance of structure at the cost of their mental health. There was a study done for,
Yeah.
yeah, there, well, I'm
Yeah,
glad
that's
you
the
admit
point,
it.
right?
I'm glad you admit it. I
I
mean, that's
need
good.
people to, yeah, I need people to take care of certain things that they don't want to do, and I want to
Why don't
impose
you
that on
take
them.
care of it?
That's the whole point.
Why don't you take care of
Well,
it?
I am fulfilling a gender role, so
No, you're
um,
again, this isn't going to take care of shit. This is actually going to just
okay.
make things harder for everyone. So again, women oftentimes are stereotyped as being irrational and emotional, but there are studies that have literally disproven this. However, based on gendered
Okay.
expectations, you would think that, well, women should be at home. Women should be with the children. They're just naturally better caretakers. They're just naturally more emotional. This
Right.
isn't true. That's based on nothing
I
but a
don't really care.
stereotype, so that would
I don't
inform
care if
your
it's true.
but that would
Right.
inform
I don't care if it's the point
the way that
isn't
you would enforce that, right?
about the proclivity, right? The point isn't the proclivity. The point is that one, I think it's a skill to be emotionally engaged, and I
I
also think
agree.
it's a skill to be emotionally disengaged, right? The ability to push through emotionality, I think, is a skill set, and I
Okay,
think that
so
it's also a skill set to be good at carefully negotiating and moving through. And so, like, these are two different skill sets, and I want
a
them
couple
both to
things
be
is this
present
isn't
in
just
my
for
society. Well,
this no
can
no no
I
this isn't
let
wait
me
wait 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 wait
flesh
wait
out
wait
an
this
idea
isn't
a little
just
bit real quick
no I
because
want
you're
to
kind of
respond to this
arguing with
first because
half an idea.
well this
Okay,
wouldn't just apply to men. So you should ask
of
women
course it
too.
doesn't just apply to men,
So
but
you can
so
ask women
okay,
also
so
to
I have an
contain their emotions in
idea.
certain like certain environments. There are absolutely appropriate times or inappropriate times to show emotion, but again, it's this idea that you need to just swallow it and suck it up. That is harmful. There might be environments like, hey, you probably shouldn't break down crying in the middle of the grocery store. But this idea that you need to just swallow it and forget about it and you never resolve that issue, that's not just going to go away. That's going to lead to more mental anguish.
Yeah, okay. So I don't really believe that anybody would think like you should never resolve it, but I still think that these aren't things that you're just like immediately good at, right? They require practice. Like everybody should have some semblance of emotional balance.
Mhm.
But what I'm saying is that I want in a society roughly half of people that are really good at navigating emotion, getting into it, digging into it, managing like really subtle relations between people. And then I want half of people to be able to be really good at pushing down what they're feeling moment to moment and getting through tough tasks. And like, so there's two models which I could impose
Why
this,
can't it
right?
be a mix of
Well,
those people? Why
do you
can't it be
want me
some
to
women that are
finish the
better at it,
point or do
some
you
men are
want to
better
just
at it?
talk over me? What do you want me to finish the point?
Yes,
Okay, so this would be the
quickly.
point. There's two models which I could impose this, right? I could impose it completely equally, or I can impose it with some bias towards gender. And my position is that I think there'd be less oppression if I integrate gender into this model versus not integrating gender into the model. And the
Mhm.
reason being is that like for some, I think one, there are some gender-based proclivities and some biological differences.
But a
And
lot of
I
what you're
think that
saying
it,
isn't. So when you say that men
okay.
should be
Well,
better
I'm
at
not saying
swallowing their
all,
emotion to get through the day-to-day stuff or whatever, well, women should do that too. If a woman's in the middle of her job, she probably shouldn't break down sobbing when she finds out she didn't get the contract she wanted or something. Like, obviously, this doesn't necessarily need to have a gender slant to it. Of course, we should control our emotions when we're in public, but there's also a time where if you're a guy, it's okay if you want to cry. It's okay if you're a man and you need to just cry. If you need to have a good cry and watch a sad movie, I don't care. Like, this idea that
right.
you're a man so you can't do that or you're a man so you can't feel this way, that is harmful. And you
Yeah,
keep
I mean,
arguing for it based
I
on
don't agree.
nothing. No, but you're
Oh,
alluding to some benefit of enforcing gender roles and you haven't demonstrated any benefit.
okay.
All you're doing is giving me, well,
So,
I would like it if one half of society was this way.
yeah.
Why?
So I think it's a benefit to have at least half of people that when a car breaks down, like they should have a reward structure that reflects them being able to change that tire. And then I
Why?
think
We
it's
have
also
companies that can
good
change
to
tires.
have,
Why do all men
uh,
need to be better at changing
well,
tires? Because they should know how to do it. Like, you can
because I
call
think
it
it results in a society with less suffering.
less
I
suffering
think
than
some
calling the
special,
tire
yeah.
repair dude?
So do you understand what I'm saying
What?
as far as the application? Okay, do you think, let's just think about this from a single gender perspective here. Let's just think about it from the a non-gendered model,
Uh-huh.
right? Okay, do you think it's good to impose certain behavior sets on a person in relation to things you need in society?
It would
Like
fully
say
depend on
say
what that
generally,
is. So if we're
right?
talking about we need people to stay safe from murder, rape, and harm in society, then yeah, I think that you could probably impose something. But what you're advocating for is just purely harmful, and it's based on nothing but we should know how to change a tire or something. Like on the
Right.
flip side, it would also be beneficial if everybody knew how to use technology. But we're not going to make this into some gendered expectation. If a woman's car breaks down, call a fucking tow truck. Why do I, as a
And I think
man,
we're
need to take
talking
care of
past
that?
each other. But you do acknowledge, okay, so like let's say you do need people to be good with technology, right? Are
Hmm.
you okay with creating reward structures that impose that on a society? So let's say like you have two different models, right? One where we do not integrate that into the reward structure and one where we
What
do
does that
integrate it,
mean?
right?
Integrated to the reward structure? Like,
So let's say the rewards that you give out starting with like social approval and then like rewards like maybe compensation or whatever, like I would say that both the social structure and the way we deal with things like legally or monetarily, like these should all reflect that need that we have as a society to have more people in technology. Would you agree to that?
I mean, not necessarily. So, like, for example, if
Okay.
someone's going to come up to and they want the job working as a tech person, then yeah, you should probably impose that they are good at technology. But this idea that it's going to benefit society if everyone is, so therefore we should impose it, I'm not sure how we would go about imposing that.
Oh,
So right now I would say there's a reward structure that exists for being good at technology because you're able to get online and possibly make money off of using that technology and knowing how to use it properly or knowing how to use social media. You can also say there's a reward structure in pulling over and helping a stranger with a flat tire. None of this has to do with gender, though. So
well,
you
I'm
would
not
be
talking about gender
there
right
would
now,
be a
right? I'm
positive
trying to
reward.
get one idea.
There
I'm
would
trying to
be a
get one
positive.
idea
Uh huh.
in isolation fleshed out with you first because I think we're talking past each other on
I
the
mean,
gender
we're
stuff.
on a 15-minute speed debate thing, so
Oh,
yeah, I don't think
okay.
we're gonna get like into every nitty gritty aspect of it. It's just you're saying that we should impose these reward systems on some kind of a gendered basis, and I'm telling you
Okay,
that
but
people still would
okay.
have a reward. A woman would have a reward for pulling over and helping a stranger. Also, this doesn't have to be gendered.
Okay, I'm dropping the gender part, right? Uh, should I impose these types of needs on society, right? Like, say we need people to build infrastructure. Should I reward, let's say I did it in a completely non-gendered way, right? Let's say uh, when I'm interacting with someone socially and they do something that fits these needs that we have, I say like, "Oh, wow, great job." And if they're doing something that deviates from the needs that we have, I go like, well, either start with
I mean,
neutrality, which is kind of negative
if
for
you're
humans, or maybe even be like, I don't really think that's a good idea.
why does this need to be imposed though? So like, if you're running a construction
Because
site,
there's,
then yeah, you should impose that.
well, because let's say your society needs the infrastructure built. And let's also say that not enough people just feel like digging ditches all day.
I mean, would it be okay to then force people basically against their will to work? I mean, no,
It's not
probably not.
necessarily against their will, but I can react to them socially in a way that I give positive reinforcement to people pursuing, uh, let's say, a way of living where they do fulfill that need, where they do go dig ditches, right? Like I could
Sure, you
make
can
it so that
provide an
I,
incentive, but that's what
yeah,
capitalism ultimately aims to do, right? With virtually everything, like either an economic benefit. Well, yeah, it's ultimately all economic. Even the social benefit usually leads to economic benefits as well. I guess I'm just
I
you kind of
agree
lost me on the
capitalism
gender
addresses
thing.
it.
You kind of lost me on the gender thing, and
Okay.
then, now we've
Well,
obviously
so
spoken for over 15 minutes here, so
oh, okay.
I either
I'm just saying that I think maybe there'd be less oppression if you took gender in consideration, if there are proclivities that pertain to gender. Like, all I'm saying is if I do impose these needs on society, I think there'd be less oppression if I took gender into the equation. Even though that
okay.
will oppress people within both those genders, I think it would result in less oppression than me
Well,
applying
what
it
is a
equally.
society made up of other than people, right? So if a bunch of them are oppressed in one way or another, it might not mean that ultimately society is less oppressed. It just doesn't really follow. Plus, you're going to see higher suicide rates as well. But either way,
I don't
David,
think
I
so.
appreciate the follow up convo, man. Have a good one, bro.
All right, thanks.